to him, but before I do, why don't we just go around the room really quickly and just briefly introduce ourselves and why we're here. So I'll start with you, Mr. McCall.
I'm Hugh McCall III, and I'm building affordable housing, doing some nonprofit stuff, interested in what's happening on the north side.
Great. I'm John Gertner. My wife and I are members of the Robinson Foundation, and I'm here because I have a very strong interest in this subject.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Bridget. I work here at Foundation for the Carolinas. I'm also a Robinson Center member, and I worked on the North Tryon Vision Plan a couple years ago, so I don't know how much that's going to play in there, but I haven't been a part of that for a little while, so I wanted to zoom back in.
Great.
I am Art Gallagher. My wife and I have been members of the Robinson Center for a number of years. Currently serving as interim executive director at Charlotte Family Housing.
I'm Michael Stallsmith. I've been a member for the center about a year now. Really just a topic I'm interested in and learning more about what things are going on in Charlotte. So.
I'm Patty Tracy. My husband and I have been members of the Robinson Center for a while, and I'm also very interested in this topic.
Chris Hudson is my name. I'm an attorney here in town, interested in urbanism, the Robinson Center's work overall, and biking in particular. I'd like to see more stuff on the north end that works for bikers.
I'm Allison Moss. I run the Families Art Foundation here in Charlotte, the Stephen Cornwell Foundation. Just joined the Robinson Center. So it's glad to be here and interested in what we're going to talk about.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Julie Campbell, and I'm the Nonprofit Partnership Director for Share Charlotte. So we partner with over 400 of the nonprofits that serve Mecklenburg County and help them with their marketing and support them in their capacity building. So I'm excited to be here.
With you guys, I work here at the foundation, also a central member, but in a former life, civil engineer, I just did environmental work. So,
I'm Tracy Dodson. I am the newest member to the city as the assistant city manager. Rob has come on to be a part of my team. I just joined the city from Lincoln Harris. Came back, I think this is my third time working for the city. I'm just passionate about moving various initiatives within our community forward.
I'm Ben Wilhelm. I've been with the Robinson Center for a few years, along with my wife Karen, and looking forward to learning more.
Ron Maganer, Master Construction. My wife and I have been members here for several years. I'm always interested in what's going on in Charlotte.
Great.
Whitney Feld, I currently manage the Robinson Center for Civic Leadership and am also very interested in this work and I'm a member myself.
Good morning. I'm Kiva Womble. I'm the new Vice President and Director of Community Programs with the Foundation, and this is my fourth weekend and my second time working with the Community Foundation. Glad to see you all here.
Great. Hey, Carol. Great. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here, especially with people who are really interested in the topic. And I really welcome the opportunity to come and talk to you all. Very often, we're just so focused on getting the job done, we often don't get out to talk about what we're doing with the community. So, again, I really appreciate this. So I wasn't going to talk about myself, and I won't do it a lot, but just a few questions. Some people often wonder, how do you become a sustainability director? And so my background, I have a law degree and a master's degree in environmental economics and policy. I always wanted to focus on policy, started in the legal field with a goal of getting into then really doing environmental policy. Put it bluntly, I followed my wife for her career in academia. I was in Boston, DC, Boston, and then here. Worked for Womble Carlisle for a few years, and then the city created their first environmental attorney/policy position, which I was lucky enough to get. And then under President Obama, we received $7 million for energy efficiency and conservation work, and I was asked to lead that program, which created this position, and here I am several years later moving projects forward. So as sustainability director, I really have two main areas that I focus on. One is more stereotypical for sustainability directors, really focused on our environmental footprint. What do we as a city, our operations, but also as a community, how do we impact the environment? Right now we're working on our first, what we're calling a strategic energy action plan. Other cities call it a climate action plan. But the focus is how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over a certain amount of time with a goal, an end goal of 2050, which aligns us with the Paris Climate Accord. The other area is smart cities, and that's what I really want to focus on today. And this is work that started for me probably in 2011 with putting Envision Charlotte together, which is a nonprofit that focuses on making our urban core the most environmentally sustainable urban core in the country, if not the world. And our very first project out of the gate was a public-private partnership really led by Jim Rogers and his vision of making uptown Charlotte energy efficient. But in particular, what's happened over the past couple of years is I've had an opportunity to really take the Smart Cities ball and run with it. And really focus on an area north of Charlotte that we're going to talk about today that we've named the North End Smart District. So very often you hear a question of smart cities. Can smart city technology create coherent and inclusive cities? And I'll point out that technology is the key word there. And really when the smart cities movement got started, it was really an effort by businesses to sell their widgets, primarily IBM. So they came out with all this great technology. They started pushing it out to cities and saying, we have this great way for you to count people or to put video cameras out to track people. You should buy it. And cities were overwhelmed. There was too much technology. It was too expensive. They didn't really know how to handle it. So my answer to this is no. And the reason I say no is because these technologies really need to be tools that we're using as people for people in our community, for our residents. So what you've seen over the past couple of years is the question is really flipped around. It's not, here's a technology, what can I do with it? It's, here are issues in my community, either opportunities or challenges, and what technology could help me achieve the goal associated with overcoming that obstacle or achieving that, that opportunity. So the motto for what we're doing, especially in the North End Smart District, is we build with our residents, not for our residents. So there's still an infrastructure, the kind of that widget, that technology piece associated with smart cities, but I would argue that a smart city is really focusing on its people, and you're focusing on all of your people, not just one segment of your people. You're looking across the economic spectrum, across the racial spectrum, and you're really trying to be as inclusive as you can. So in Charlotte, we define a smart city as using data, technology, and collaboration to inform our decision making and to take action, most importantly. So data helps you understand where you are and where you're going, and if you're achieving your goals or not. The technology helps you get there, and the collaboration is key to make sure you're actually building what your residents need, and you're bringing in all the partners to help get things done, because building a great community, as you all know, can't be done just by city government or any government.
Before you leave that,
Yep.
on that first piece.
Yep.
Given that the city sold all the land where all these apartments are being built in the core down on the south side,
Mm-hmm.
what did y'all require, if anything, of the developers to address your first paragraph there?
So I'd say we didn't have, in this particular, anything in place at the time, and now we're working on getting more in place, especially as we look to put together a comprehensive plan and look to modify the UDO. So I think we have a great opportunity to work with developers in the community to address more of these issues, but I'd say in past years we didn't have a lot in place to require or even incentivize developers to do that work. So the North End Smart District, this was a project that started several years ago, really born out of a trip that several city leaders took to Barcelona, which arguably had the first smart district in the world, and really inspired us to take a look at our community and how do we start building with our residents and not for our residents. So here's a map of the smart district. Not used to two screens. To orient you, to the south is Uptown. Your left is I-77 as the western boundary. The eastern boundary is North Davidson Street, and you'll see the blue line extension there in blue. The northern boundary is Atondo Avenue, and the southern boundary is 277. Some key landmarks there. Up in the northwest corner, you have the Bright Walk development, which is where the Double Oaks community used to be. Down in the southwest corner is where Avid Exchange has their headquarters and the Music Factory. Obviously, the blue line over to the east, what we would call our old intermodal yard, because now we have a new one out at the city, is right next to the blue line. See some of the stats related to this. This area has really gone through a stereotypical deindustrialization, post-industrialization decline. You've got 400 warehouse buildings, 1 out of 6 properties are vacant, but you have 8 neighborhoods in this area that are historic, very proud, very well organized neighborhoods. The median annual income is about $25,000, median monthly rent about $680. Some other stats there, I'm not going to go through them all. About 50% of the homes here are rented, the other 50 are owned, which is higher than in most of Charlotte. Right in the middle of the Smart District, we have a 100-acre parcel. This is 75 acres of that 100. Some of you might know it now as Camp North End. If you're a historian, you might know that building number 3 was built by Henry Ford back in the 20s to make Model T Fords. The Ford company built that building as well as a boiler house and a water tower, which is still standing. During World War II, the Army bought all 75 acres, built out the rest of the property. It became the quartermaster depot for the southeastern United States, so everything ran through this 75 acres and was distributed out to bases in the southeast. And then eventually Eckerd bought it. It became their distribution center, and then it became Rite Aid. 2 years ago, about, a company out of Manhattan called Atco bought all 75 acres, and they're redeveloping it really with the idea of being an innovation center. The city owns the bottom 25 acres, and that's where we have our public safety campus. So here's a view from Snoopy, our helicopter, to give you an idea, looking north down into the city, of what it looks like. So you'll see some great treed neighborhoods, but also very industrial and very commercial oriented as well.
Looking south, right, Rob?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, so you're standing north and looking south, I'm sorry.
So Rob, I've been out there, and it's if you haven't seen it, it's pretty incredible what they're trying to. It's pretty transformative.
Yeah.
It's a lot of grassroots incubated companies, and if you go there now, there's actual commerce on site.
That's
that
right.
If you're an individual consumer of hair salon, or you need a motorcycle,
That's
you
right.
can go get it, and it's pretty
Yeah.
incredible what's going on.
And that was one of the goals of the developer, was to bring in the first renovated piece of the property, really local entrepreneurs and innovators. So they really looked, especially to try to get people from the surrounding neighborhoods, and they were very successful, to your point. In one of the buildings, which is going to be called the Gamma Goat building, because during World War II, that's where they made Gamma Goats, which was the predecessor to the Humvee. Junior Achievement is moving off of Tryon Street into a new home, going from about 12,000 square feet to 30,000 square feet. So that'll be the first big, large tenant that they have there. And they're hoping to open at the end of June. So here's the vision for the Smart District, focusing on economic development and job growth, but also focusing on a quality of life that is fueled by Smart City Engine. So data, technology, and collaboration with a strong emphasis on equitable community engagement. So there are 6 main areas of projects going on. We're going to focus on number 6. I'm not going to read through all of those, but wanted you to just know that there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different partners involved in the work that's going on out there. So building human capital and community capacity is what I want to really focus on today. So how do we create economic mobility opportunities and communities' identified needs? So as we started to build out this plan and we start talking about this, what you see in those bullet points is often what I'd hear from people about, how do you build economic opportunity? What are the pieces of economic opportunity and mobility? And what are some of the needs of the community? So bridging the digital divide, workforce development is obviously a huge focus in Charlotte right now. Employment opportunities for our local residents, affordable housing, mobility options, homelessness, streetscapes, and especially on the north end, protecting community character, because we're seeing a lot of gentrification happen on the north end. A lot of people who would like to age in place or pass their properties on to the next generation who are having a problem doing it. So working with our team and working with our partners, we came up with some goals and got some advice from people on how we build human capital and community capacity. So the first is be aware of your unintended consequences, be transparent, and work for solutions. So a good example of unintended consequences, when we first went out to the community and out to the community leaders and showed them the map of the SMART district, the boundary was a street lower than Atondo. And I was talking to a third generation resident, and literally after about an hour and a half of talking, I took a breath and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, I love this, but the first thing is you cannot have this street be the northern boundary for the SMART district. And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "When I was growing up, that was the dividing line between good Druid Hills and bad Druid Hills. And we've spent years getting rid of that demarcation. And if you're now going to call the southern part smart and the northern part dumb, you're dead in the water." So that line got moved very quickly. But here was an idea that we're going to do something good for the community, and an unintended consequence could have been that before I even got started, I had now opened up an old wound and split the community right away. Involving the community early in designing the solution, we had a framework, we had an idea, but we literally went to them and said, "We're willing to change anything. We want to know from your experience and what your goals and visions are for the community, what you want to do. Be nimble and listen. Allow the community to change your direction." Similar to the first point, we've had several ideas that we've brought forward that we thought would be great, and the community just said, "No way, this is just not going to work for us. It's not what we're interested in." Another example of that is we had put together a video. Well, we didn't put this together. We found this video that we thought would be great to show the larger community that defined a smart city. And we went and we showed it to our neighborhood leaders, and you could just, as they were watching this 2-minute video, just see the expression go from interest to kind of disgust. And they said, "You can't show this. No one's going to understand it. It doesn't speak to us at all. You need to come up with something different." So we actually hired one of the neighborhood residents who's a videographer to work with the community to create a video that demonstrates what a smart city is. So we have people from the community who are in the video explaining the different components of a smart city. And when we showed that to the residents at our first community meeting, people stood up and cheered because they knew the people and they understood what they were talking about. Allow the community to determine what they want and work to provide it through shared decision making. I'll show you some examples of that. But everything we do, we run through our community leaders. We have community meetings, small, large. We have phone calls. We over communicate to some extent, but we found that's been a part of our success. Less planning and talking, more implementation and action. There were about 13 plans when we look back through our plans that were on the shelf done for the North End over the years. So this community had done a ton of work around planning, but there hadn't been a whole lot of action. And in one of our very first meetings, they said to us, "We'll be honest with you. We don't trust you. We don't believe you're going to do anything. We believe you're just going to come in, talk to us, take our ideas, and that's the end of it." So we had a goal from really early on to disprove that and to put things into action, and we'll show you some of those pieces. So kickstarts. This is another example of listening to your residents. We normally would call these pilot projects. And when we started talking about pilot projects, the residents said, "We don't like the term pilot projects. It makes us feel like guinea pigs, and we've been guinea pigs for years. You have to come up with a different term for this." So we said, "Well, what's a good term? What would you like?" And they said kickstarts. We like the idea of them being called kickstarts. So that's why we call them kickstarts. So some of the key pieces of developing these kickstarts and implementing them, we really wanted to increase the sense of project ownership. We didn't want this to be a city project that they were just participating in. The goal was for this to be a community project, really, that the city was facilitating and bringing other partners to the table. We wanted to accomplish some goals that had already been set. For example, goals that were laid out in these plans around energy efficiency and mobility and connectivity. We wanted to leverage available opportunities. As you know, there's a lot going on in Charlotte right now, especially around economic mobility. We didn't want to reinvent the wheels. We wanted to leverage opportunities where we could. And we wanted to build collaborative relationships. We really wanted to work not only with the residents, but with foundations, with private partners. And like I said, we co-created these Kickstart projects from the beginning. So really our recipe, can't see the bottom part, for working is we want to share information with our residents. So again, we might come with an idea based on past learnings, but we want to consult with them and really get their input and not just listen, but collaborate with them and really incorporate their thoughts and their vision for their neighborhoods. And then it comes down to shared decision making the whole way through, from the initial concept to further developing it and implementing it. Collaborative relationships, the picture on the left is our team, really. You'll see there are folks on my team from the city, but most of those folks are the leaders of the 8 neighborhoods. In the upper right corner, Daryl and Melissa Gaston are kind of the unofficial mayors for the North End. We couldn't do any of this without their leadership. They have been out there giving us advice and really being champions for what we want to do out there. From our point of view, community-driven solutions allow us as public servants to provide a better service to our residents. And these were all meetings where we had an open dialogue with people about the visions and the plans and what would work and what wouldn't work. And what we ended up with were these co-created Kickstart projects. So the image on the left were the criteria that we used to really pick 4 Kickstart projects. And the 4 projects were Tech Charlotte, Smart Homes, Healthy Communities, and then one we called Build Your Own, because we said to the residents, you have a year, you need to use data, technology, and collaboration, and you have $10,000 from a grant that we had received to spend on it. Build your own Kickstart project. And this area is really an amenity desert. It's a food desert, it's a drugstore desert, it's a corner store desert. So they're really focused on how do we get fresh, healthy food to our residents, and that's what the Build Your Own Kickstart is. So I wanted to focus on 2 of them, Smart Homes. This is all about reducing energy burden. So especially with rental units and in lower income neighborhoods, these families are spending a disproportionate amount of their take-home income on high utility bills. So we wanted to work with them, especially on the electricity side, to reduce those energy bills using data, technology, and partnership. So here are our partners: City of Charlotte, Duke Energy, Amazon, and Intel. You might recognize these. So every home, we worked with Duke Energy to help the residents, and we have 33 homes in the Kickstart project, to understand their data. How much energy are you using? What is sucking up the energy? When are you using more? When are you using less? And then partnering with Duke, Amazon, and Intel, each one of these homes got a smart home bundle. So over there on the left, you have Alexa, then you have a smart thermostat, a smart light bulb, and an app. So what the team created was an opportunity for folks to understand their data and then use technology to control their energy usage. So the idea behind Alexa is that she, or it, I'll call it she helps the residents control the utilities in the home. So in the morning when you're leaving, you say, Alexa, have a good day. And she says, you too. But then she will lower you probably lower your thermostat. So you're not using as much energy when you're gone. She'll turn off all your lights. And then during the day, you have an opportunity to control those if you want. Say you're coming home earlier, you can use your app to turn the temperature up or make it cooler, or turn some lights on if it's later. but that you basically have set up, you've programmed your house for the most efficient use of the electricity. We've definitely hit some bumps. This is the first time in the country a program like this has been rolled out, especially with these partners. So there have been technology bumps, and there have been community relation bumps as well. People having certain expectations that weren't met. Duke has been amazing in terms of going out. We've had a couple of Alexa crashes, but then we hear from people, we're tired of having Duke Energy. They're people in our house. They're great, but we're tired of them being here. So we've had to really work and have the conversation with the residents, but we're at a place now where everyone has their what are called scenes programmed in the home, and we hope to start seeing some energy savings, especially as we hit the hot months. The next project is focused on bridging the digital divide. We just launched this space 3 weeks ago. This is around technology, and when we first started the program, and this is still in the works, but it's on the side burner right now, we partnered with Microsoft to bring some of Microsoft's high school curriculum to West Charlotte High School. And when Dr. Wilcox came in and there was kind of some shuffling, this had to get put on the side burner because it wasn't a priority. So we still hope to launch this in the fall, but what we heard from our residents is we need a space, we need a community space where we can go and get free internet and connectivity. We don't have places like that. Some of us don't have a good data plan that gives us a lot of access. Some of us don't even have data plans. But what we found is about 78–80% of the folks in the smart district do have a smartphone. So we worked with many partners to build what the neighbors termed the Nest. So this is in Camp North End. It's in Huga, which is a co-working space. And you could see that open garage door there is about 1,200 square feet of community space. And we partnered early on with Google Fiber. They supplied a grant to allow for the upfitting of this space. And they also recently announced that this is going to be their second connected community space, which means they're going to provide free gigabit fiber service to this place. But connectivity wasn't enough. We needed to really address digital literacy, because being connected is wonderful, but knowing what opportunities that connectivity brings to the table is even more important. So one of our biggest partnerships here is with Red Ventures Road to Hire program, where they focus on 18 to 25-year-olds who have a higher barrier to employment than the average 18 to 25-year-old. And they have a 12-week course where they pay these folks to get trained for a job at Red Ventures or at one of their partner companies. And they are holding a cohort in our space, in the Nest space. They were being held down in Fort Mill at headquarters, but they just weren't able to attract the numbers that they needed because of the distance. We're also partnering with Queen's University Digital Charlotte team for an Earn a Laptop program. If you go through a 6-week course of basically a computer internet 101, you will get a laptop for free, and we have 2 spots reserved for men from the men's shelter. We're also working with Black Tech Charlotte to run Tech Youth Program, where we have tech training and internships for high school students over the summer. And then our residents, several of them are in the tech field, and they wanted to teach courses to their neighbors. So Saturday mornings we're working on building courses. And then we're also talking to some corporate partners about training as well. So quickly, because I know I've been talking a lot, I want to run through one other project that's really in its vision stage, but we're really excited about. And then I've been working really closely with Carol on, and we have great hopes for. So this is in the Smart District, and I'll obviously take plenty of questions when we're done here. And we're calling it the Campus for Education Excellence and Workforce Housing. So being in the Smart District, it's part of our larger vision around economic development and job growth. The specific goal for this project is through collaboration with the community, so not only the residents, but folks like you at the table with private partners, we want to make an investment in workforce development and workforce housing that is really moving the needle on quality of life. So this campus, known as Educational Excellence and Workforce Housing, really has 4 components to it. And we don't have the site nailed down yet. I'll show you in the next slide potentially where it's going to be. But here are the 4 components. We want to build workforce housing and affordable housing that potentially really targets public servants, so teachers, police officers, people in the fire department. We also want to build a facility that's focused on tech education, primarily focusing on juniors and seniors in high school, and again, those 18 to 25-year-olds. The CMS is actually rolling out a facility now called The Rock in partnership with Goodwill that is focused on the construction trades, where the students in high school in the morning will go to kind of your normal high school classes, but in the afternoon they literally walk across the street and get more in-depth training and hopefully apprenticeships. And then in the evening, the facility is opened up for 18 to 25-year-olds to get training and certificates. And that's what we're focusing on at the tech school. We're looking at the IT field and also tech in advanced manufacturing. Yeah.
Are y'all joining forces with other organizations that are doing a lot of the same stuff, like CIEC that goes through CPCC and stuff like that? I mean, because there seems to be a lot of individual organizations that sort of pointing to the same goal.
Yep.
Looks like there's a way we could
Definitely.
Because our company's involved with the mayors.
Yep.
But there's just a lot of other organizations.
Yeah, so I'll touch on that in the next slide, but that definitely is a goal here, and there is a lot going on. The third piece is a makerspace or a fabrication lab. So this is the idea behind these spaces is you are providing a space where people can go and have access to technology or other tools to make or fabricate stuff. For example, we would want the makerspace, if we're doing IT work, to have a component where folks can come in and actually have hands-on experience in the IT field. If we're focusing on advanced manufacturing, it's the same idea. It's more of the hands-on as opposed to the classroom. But we also want to open this up to the community and have a space that fits what the community is looking to do. So for example, some fab labs have woodworking spaces because there are folks in the community who are in construction or woodworking, but they can't afford their own equipment or the space to do it. So the fab lab, the makerspace, is a place for them to get started. And then the fourth piece is around community placemaking. How do we create a place that is really open to the community for them to go and call their own, to do Sunday picnics or to do Saturday evening films on the lawn? So the area we're looking at right now is the old Double Oaks School, which, as you can see from there, is just to the northwest of Camp North End. It's an 11-acre plot of land. The school is being surplused. Unfortunately, the buildings, there were some arson incidents, and the buildings are all unusable now, so that property needs to be raised. But we're looking at purchasing this from CMS and turning it into this campus. It is an excellent piece of property that has a great location, not only to Uptown, but to several neighborhoods, to Camp North End, to the Blue Line, to Avid Exchange. So we just feel it'd be a really great place to start this community. Some comparable models, and I won't go into these. The Teachers Village in New Jersey took this model and is having great success. And then there's a place in Rotterdam, which doesn't have the commercial or the housing, but co-locates students as well as companies around technology. So partners to date, getting to your question, the foundation, I mentioned Carol's been involved in this. CMS is at the table, CPCC, the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council, and then City of Charlotte Economic Development Departments. So we are looking to bring more partners to the table, but we didn't want to start reaching out until we really understood the lay of the land, what was needed, where there are opportunities, and who was doing what. So obviously Goodwill, Urban League, UNC Charlotte, some of the other groups you mentioned are folks that we want to start bringing to the table. And we're kind of at that phase right now in terms of opening up the bubble a little bit more, but we wanted to have a bit of a straw man before we went out there. So I'll stop now. This is my contact information if you have, that you should have, if you have any other questions. That's it.
Who has any questions for Rob?
I always silenced you.
So on the smart homes thing you're
Mhm.
talking about, how much of that's just people leaving the thermostat at the wrong
It's a lot of it.
setting versus old homes that are poorly insulated?
So,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, so how much of it is people leaving the thermostat at the wrong temperature versus old homes?
The reason I ask is I was going to say you could try to partner with Home Depot or Lowe's.
Mhm.
I mean, Lowe's is just up the road, or Habitat has a division that goes and rehabs mainly homes they've done, but I'm sure they're always looking
Yeah.
for ways to get involved.
So we actually, it's a great question, great point, because it doesn't make sense to just focus on your thermostat if you have a very leaky home. So one of the things that I didn't mention is Duke Energy has a program where they focus on low-income communities and they provide weatherization for homes. So it's not a deep dive in terms of weatherization, but they literally will go door to door and they will provide weather stripping around windows and doors. They will, I'm forgetting the other major thing that they do. They do some insulation if it's really bad, but not large scale. But the idea is before we moved in with the smart technology, there was weatherization done in all of these homes to address what you're talking about. Now, some of these homes, could they use more insulation? I'm sure they could. At this point, we weren't, we did actually reach out to Lowe's and Home Depot, and it was just gonna be a whole other layer that would have been a little too much at this point. I think in future projects, it would be great to be able to do deeper dives, and that's something we actually did under the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Program, is we had micro grants for homes where people had, if they put up 50%, we'd put up 50% to do more insulation, do window replacements. But the thermostat, where I thought you were going with the question is, the thermostat is the biggest piece of the puzzle here, because people will often leave their house at, you know, in wintertime at 78 degrees for the whole day, and during the summer, they'll keep it at 68 for the whole day. And what Duke has found through their research is you can have a huge impact on your bill by lowering or raising that depending on the season.
Rob, one of the questions I would have is of the 8 neighborhoods in the district, in their eyes, what would make this a success for them?
Mm-hmm.
Have they talked about that?
Yeah, so there are, I think there's success for each kickstart around, I think there are kind of 2 buckets of success around each of the kickstart. I think one is achieving the specific goal for each. So were people seeing lower utility bills? Were people able to get access to the internet and get digital literacy training? But then I think another piece of success is, was the community really involved in the building and implementing of these projects? And was the community voice really heard? And were the plans that we developed really implemented? So at the end of the day, you know, what I think we would all think is success is people feel like, for the first time in a long time, the city partnered with them as well as the community to help them achieve their goals, and that they were able to say, we took part in a program that is truly addressing and benefiting what we think is important.
And on the heels of that, so say that there's some things that grow out of this that everybody kind of looks at and says, this made a big difference. What can the city do, I guess, to mobilize that, to go do that within that district?
So one of our goals is replication. So how do we use the work that we're doing in the smart district and replicate it in other parts of the city? So what I would love to see, take smart homes for example, is we continue to partner with Duke and with Amazon and Intel and maybe others, and look at other parts of the city that could really benefit from a similar program, and do something very similar. You know, not just go in and say, here's a program, that worked in the North End, we're going to do it here, is go in and say, here's a program that worked in the North End. We were able to achieve these goals. What's unique or different about your community? How do we address that to achieve those goals? So for each of these projects and some of the other ones that I haven't mentioned, we're looking to replicate them. Something else we're looking to do in the city is, this project was done really through an equity lens. We had a grant that the goal of which was to do sustainability projects, but to bring people of color to the table to develop, implement, and critique. So internally, we're going to also use this as a learning example of how do we view our work through that equity lens, which I think, especially where we are in Charlotte right now, is extremely important. So one of our goals when we kind of wrap up the grant period is to almost to do an internal roadshow where we go around to different departments, maybe it's to leadership team meetings or team meetings, and say, here are the learnings on how we did this project. Not so much this is how we reduced bills, but this is how we built with the community. This is what worked, this is what didn't work, and you should consider this in doing your projects as well.
I have a question about community preservation. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about how you maintain the integrity of the residents that are there today and mitigate a lot of energy around investors coming in and driving up market value rates of rents and home ownership.
Yeah, so that wasn't one of our initial goals, but in the first meeting we had with the neighborhood leaders, the first two questions we heard was, how are you going to address the food desert, which I hadn't mentioned at all, and what are you going to do about gentrification? So the food desert actually became one of the Kickstart projects, as I mentioned. You know, the gentrification piece, the loss of community character, we haven't addressed that head on. I would actually we're going to apply for another round of grant funding. I think in the second phase of this, start working more on that. So one of the things we've really strived to do around community character is, through that community building, help connect more folks in the community that weren't connected before, to help build that community cohesion and strength so people can work together and they know how to work together, and to facilitate that conversation. One of the opportunities that the neighborhood leaders, they have a group called the North End Community Coalition, took advantage of was they got a $10,000 grant from, was it One Charlotte or Charlotte? One of the funding mechanisms that came about as a result of the economic mobility study. They got a $10,000 grant to do 3 workshops around gentrification. And they were really education series where they invited the residents in to help them understand what was happening in their community. Why are you now seeing all these signs pop up that say, we buy houses? Why are people literally showing up on your doorstep and offering you cash for your homes? So helping them understand what's going on, but then also helping them understand what resources are currently available. So, for example, the city has some home repair programs that folks could take advantage of if they are having code issues. Are there mortgage assistance programs? But then also to have a dialogue about what might be some opportunities that they as a community could start developing. So for example, on the west side, they're doing, I think it's land banking that they're doing. But it's a difficult issue, and I think it's something that obviously the city is very focused on with the affordable housing, with the bond referendum, but also a big component of that is not just building new housing, it's addressing existing housing. Council member Harlow actually has in the budget a fund to help people age in place. So I think there's obviously a lot of work left to do, and I think in the Smart District coming up, we would like to start working more with partners to facilitate that conversation. Yes.
I can't help but when I think, first of all, I think it's great. I just learned about the Dudley Street initiative out of Boston. And I
Okay.
can't, like, recently, and I just can't help but compare them. I'm curious what the city's kind of timeline is on this. Is
Mhm.
this, are you viewing this as sort of a wrap, we're ready to duplicate this elsewhere? And viewing the investments made as a wonderful attempt, and then the community needs to kind of pick it up? Or is it more like a 30-year track that they were trying in Boston to really make sure that these residents have that continued support? Because they only make $25,000 a
Right.
year on average.
So we looked at the Kickstart projects as really 2-year projects with a goal of having the residents really pick up the work. With the city facilitating, but really transitioning the leadership over to the residents, and that's also kind of the time frame for grant funding.
Sure.
In terms of kind of the bigger picture, some of the other 5 pillars I mentioned, we had about a 5-year timeline on getting those projects done. One of the things I'd like to do and talk internally with folks like Tracy is, now that we've seen some success, more opportunities, more challenges have presented, how do we do a larger master plan for this area that would have a much longer time frame? But I'd say initially our goal was, we have this idea, we have this vision, can we get traction with it? And if so, how do we further develop it past a 5-year timeline? And we're at that point now where I think we need to start looking longer term of how do we not only do more in the smart district, but to your point, how do we look to replicate the successes in other parts of the city? Or are there other parts of the city where there are completely different issues where we could use the data technology and collaboration piece?
You mentioned that a New York developer bought Camp North End.
Yep.
Has that been a challenge to work with somebody who's not local? What is their presence here?
Yeah. So they've actually been wonderful to work with. I think there are development challenges that they've been facing in terms of taking old structures and trying to be innovative and creative with them. But from the get-go, and they would say one of the reasons they were interested in this area was because of the vision around creating a smart district and really focusing on the community. Their goal has been community engagement, understanding what the community's hopes and fears are, and really providing a vehicle for community engagement. So in addition to what we were talking about earlier with bringing in local entrepreneurs and innovators, they're working on creating connectivity from the east side to the west side, because right now you actually can't get across the railroad tracks because it's fenced off. So their plan calls for 3 connection points across Camp North End. So the first will be on the south end, Siegel Avenue, which got blocked off I think when Eckerd took ownership of the property. So they're going to be working with the city and using some of our CIP dollars to realign that street and improve it, open it back up. So that'll be a main corridor. And then they have 2 other spots going across where vehicles will be able to go, but it's more pedestrian focused, and vehicles more in terms of like delivery vehicles and fire trucks. But they're focusing on reopening that connection. So I think they're very committed to the vision that we have for it, and not just coming in and building something and leaving. They have a 20 to 30 year plan, and they're a family owned business, so they don't look to build and then flip the properties. Yeah.
Are there any thoughts or visions around just thinking about a connected district that could potentially be more isolating than connected, as you're looking to replicate potentially across the city how these districts begin to connect with each other and bring a larger city together versus isolating one district and momentum around one individual area?
Yeah, we have thought about that. We've also thought about how do we even potentially get out of Charlotte. It's a more of a regional concept, and one of the key facilitators of that conversation has been the Blue Line extension. So this, if you remember from the original map, right next to the blue line is the intermodal yard, which forms a huge physical barrier for a lot of folks in the Smart District to get over. So one of the projects, which was kind of a quasi-kickstart, was a partnership between CATS and Lyft to address what's called first mile, last mile service. So how do you get folks who maybe want to take public transportation but live just a little too far to walk or to bike to that public transportation? So the partnership between CATS and Lyft is such that there is an area around the Parkwood station in the Smart District and also around the University stop up near University where CATS will subsidize your Lyft ride up to $4 if you're going to be taking the blue line. And what we've talked about is how do we start, kind of to your point, not necessarily smart districts, but are there areas where we can start linking people in terms of job opportunities or workforce development opportunities? So for example, you have someone who lives in the Smart District and they want to get to a job down in Red Ventures. So you can use Lyft and CATS to get you over to the blue line and down, but then you're stuck for now at least because we don't have a Lyft partnership. So what we've been talking to CATS about is, can we potentially repurpose van pools so it's not just folks commuting into work, but it's maybe providing, it could be still providing folks getting to a job, but getting to workforce development. So it's making those connections, not just necessarily the smart districts, but are there areas in the city that there's opportunities that we can start connecting people to?
Have you identified the major landowners of the district?
So yes, I can't name them all right now. That's something we did really early on. That 75 acres was a huge piece right in the heart of it. So we really, in the beginning, before ATCO came on the scene, were really focused on that piece of property. Some of the other Flywheel Group owns some property in this area. CMS actually has several properties in the area as well. Bright Walk, Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership not only has Bright Walk, but they've been buying up pieces of property in the area as well.
Does the city own land? I mean, intermodal, I assume, is owned by the city.
It's not. It's Norfolk Southern.
Norfolk Southern.
So that's one of the reasons why it's such a barrier. We can't go above, through. We wouldn't want to go through, below.
Railroad time.
Sorry.
Thing called railroad time.
Yeah.
Called eternity.
Exactly. The city doesn't own a lot of property in this area at all. The county has some parks. They have a community center there as well. But in terms of land that we own, I think there's one parcel that's right next to Byers Elementary School, and that's about it.
Is there a library in that district?
There's not. It truly is an amenity desert. Yeah, which is one of the reasons that we focused on. I mean, there are other reasons as well, including the Blue Line coming in, the redevelopment of Bright Walk, Avid Exchange, and the work that they were doing down there in the Music Factory. But that was one of the reasons, is that in talking with the residents, we just saw some real opportunities to.
Is the county involved in that?
They are to some extent, mainly Parks and Rec, because that's who owns the land there. So we've been talking to Parks and Rec about doing some digital divide work. We've also, Charlotte Housing Authority, one of the other projects, Dillahay Courts is one of their developments, and we're going to be bringing free internet to their facility for a year, very similar to what we're doing with the Nest, and bringing in digital training behind that as well. Yeah.
What about the, is your department part of Charlotte planning? Or obviously you talk to planning.
Right.
How is the planning department commission seeing the project, and is there obviously this ties into the gentrification issue? Are you focused on specific uses of parcels that will minimize simply building apartments, et
Yeah.
cetera, the kind of thing you've been
So-
seeing elsewhere?
I'm part of economic development now. I got moved there when Tracy came on board. But I have 3 planning staff members on my team and have had several conversations with our relatively new planning director. One of the things we've been talking about is around planning is interested in doing a comprehensive plan for the city, which we haven't had, I think, since the 70s. And how do we not only take the lessons learned in the smart district, but how do we do more along the lines of what you're talking about? So how do we look at land use in the city in terms of facilitating mobility, in terms of gentrification, in terms of economic development, in terms of workforce development? So I think the work that planning is going to be doing over the next year or two is going to be really fundamental to what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's all very exciting and good, but one thing scares me.
Uh-huh.
It sounds, if the meeting didn't start with the word sustainability, it sounds more like economic development.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me nervous because in this city, that's the king.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a decision to be made, it's always made in favor of the development and the developers. And if you collaborate with big companies, you follow their objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put the challenge on you to make sure this is about sustainability and resilience and those terms that apply to the people in the cities. I mean, I'm just worried about that.
Yeah.
I've been pushing this. There's a concept in Silicon Valley, you may know. It's called MVP, minimum viable product. And that reason they wanted it to be MVP. But what it is when you start a project, whether you call it pilot or you said pilot, they didn't like that. Now you're calling them kickstart. But what they call them in Silicon Valley are minimum viable products. And what they say is, if you're going to start a project collaboratively with all a broad group of partners like Nest and Amazon and people like that. Now those people are in it. They're corporations. They may want to look generous, but they have one goal, to grow and make money. So what these MVP, these minimum viable projects, is they have to have, before you start one, you have to say, what am I trying to prove with this project? Trying to prove feasibility and cost effectiveness. It has to be able to work, and I have to be able to afford it for the city.
Right.
And then I have to have a plan for it to grow. And you mentioned all these things. I mean, you know that everything I'm saying. I'm just trying to put it all together in one thought. You have to have a plan on how this can be. They call it scalability in Silicon Valley. You have to, in order to double it, you can't. If it takes 4 times as much work to make it twice as big, you're quickly constrained and you're done.
Right.
You're only going to have your project and then it's going to go away. And the only other thing I'll say is the reason I'm concerned is that I observed what happened at the airport. Sustainability at the airport died. There was a major effort to make the airport energy sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and I know there's still things being done, completely done. And no one would talk to me about why, and I think it was corporate pressure.
Yeah. So to your, so on the airport, they're actually doing their first sustainability plan right now.
It's their second, but
the first that has leadership support. I'll put it that way. To your first point, you're exactly right, and particularly working on the smart homes, that's a conversation that we had the first time we spoke to them, and that we continue as recent as yesterday when we were on the phone talking about the project. And yes, you need to recognize that their goal in the end is a business goal. But we would only work with them if they made the commitment to work through or work toward our goals of community engagement and participation with the residents and taking their feedback and actually doing something with it. And they've been good to date with it. I mean, there have been bumps in the road, especially around communication and making assumptions that shouldn't have been made. But we see a benefit from these partnerships and don't believe we're going to be able to achieve some of our larger goals if we're not doing public-private partnerships. So I think we need to keep our eye on the prize, but at the same time, a lot of these projects wouldn't be happening if we didn't have a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
But so what's the
The
goal?
city's a lot more powerful than they act. I think we're so afraid in the city of, we won't get the next development project, we won't get the next company to come in. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. If we do the right thing and have a solid plan, they'll come.
I wouldn't disagree with you. Do you have a question?
Workforce and affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
How much?
So we are scoping that out right now. So if we do get that piece of property, we have building limitations in terms of stream buffer that runs through the property, neighborhood buffer. So I'm actually working with the planning department on a vision.
Which
for
parcel was that, Rob?
This is the Double Oaks parcel. I'm sorry. This is for the question was getting to the campus for education excellence and workforce development. How much housing? How much workforce development? So a lot of that is going to depend on how much we can build there, and also what the residents want in their neighborhood. So I can't give you an exact number yet. Hopefully in about a month I'll be able to, in terms of at least the housing piece. And what we're working on the tech piece is getting an understanding of if we're able to build a facility of so many thousand square feet, how many students could we potentially run through there? So like I mentioned, we're still in the early phase, but stay tuned.
Can you talk a little bit more about the food desert?
Yeah.
Possible solutions and what's working?
Yeah, so there honestly isn't a lot working right now. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership has tried for years to bring in a supermarket, one that we would be familiar with. The biggest success that they had was Walmart showed some interest, but the residents weren't interested in the Walmart. I think mainly from a traffic point of view, they were looking to put it off Statesville Avenue. So there's really one supermarket there called Wayne's Market, which has very high prices, not the greatest selection. So I think you'll have folks like Mecklenburg Charlotte Housing Partnership who continue to try and court big grocery chains. What we're trying to do through our Kickstart is, look for opportunities to start small around. We're doing a farmer's market where we're getting the food, getting the word out, getting the access there. We've actually been talking to Amazon. They have, I don't know if you've seen their lockers around Charlotte, but they have these spaces where they have lockers and you can do pickups or drop-offs there. And they actually have a food service where they will deliver food to your door. But one of the things we've been talking about is there an opportunity to place these lockers in community gathering points, so like the Ivory Baker Community Center or in church community centers, where on a certain day of the week, maybe it's after Mass, or when you're picking your son up from the community center, there's your fresh food for the week waiting for you in the locker. It's a business decision for a lot of these grocery stores, and they just don't see or haven't seen the market there. I think that's going to change. But until that does change, you have people who don't have access to fresh, consistent food supply. And if people are taking the train or driving to get there right now. So it's a big challenge with not an easy solution.
Interesting, Salvation Army has a model in other cities where they're doing nonprofit grocery stores. Actually, I'm in the Belmont neighborhood, so we're in a food desert as well. And I reached out to Salvation Army here, but it doesn't sound like they're aware of that or looking at that
Yeah.
on market.
Yeah, I've seen those models. I would love to do it here. I don't have the bandwidth to do it, but it has proven successful. We'll have to see if it's sustainable in those cities as well.
Now, did you look at the Villa Heights and Belmont neighborhood as part of the?
We did, and actually, the district to the east was smaller originally as well, and then we wanted to include the blue line. So it was nothing against those neighborhoods. It was really just trying to keep the scope manageable. And if those neighborhoods came to me and said, "Hey, we're right next door, can we be included?" I would probably say yes. But you know, as a two-person office and building a team made up of folks from other departments, definitely wanted to keep the scope smaller, which you'd probably argue I was unsuccessful at, but at least geography-wise, that was the goal in not including those.
And another question. You talk about, somebody asked about the land or property ownership. Have you looked at, there was a high percentage of rentals, rental homes in the neighborhood. Are there individual investors who own a lot of the properties so that those are at risk of being combined and to create the large apartment complexes?
So no, that's not where I thought you were going. There are a few that we know of that do own several houses, but I've never looked at it from that angle in terms of, are they contiguous, would they be knocked down to build an apartment building? So that's a good question. Yeah, the one I'm thinking of, his properties are pretty spread out. Not saying he couldn't knock some down and do like townhomes or something, but I think he'd have a hard time doing something really big. There was actually one development that was put in for zoning in Druid Hills where there used to be several homes that were raised, and now it looks like a park with a grid system to put in a multifamily unit. So there are some spots in the north end where nothing needs to even be raised to do it, and developers have bought the property. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens to that neighborhood because it's very residential right now. And that comes in.
If we want to find out more about how the different Kickstart projects are going, or more just to learn how this is progressing, is there like your website?
There is. So that website will link. Well, actually, we just launched NorthEndSmartDistrict.com. And I need to check with our communications department to make sure that if you go to that website, the Smart District tab links you. Don't do it right now because I have a feeling you're going to tell me it doesn't work. But NorthEndSmartDistrict.com, if you go straight there, we literally just launched that 2 weeks ago. It talks about all the Kickstarts, and we'll be updating that and putting more information on. We're also in the process of updating the sustainability side. And to your point, we're doing our strategic energy action plan, which is going to set some very ambitious goals, and is the first time we've had the opportunity to do that. And that should go to council in October for their approval. Yep.
I don't think you mentioned the total unemployment rate in the district and what your target might be. Are you looking at a five-year plan to try and improve that, or what timeline do you have for improving that?
Right. I can't remember. We do have the percentage of unemployment. It's much higher than the Charlotte average. I think it's up around 25%. We don't have a goal right now in terms of bringing that down. One of the things we have talked about in relation to the Campus for Excellence is setting a goal and how much impact could this center have on it. So, and also kind of in the next phase, especially with Tracy on board, would like to be able to focus more on the workforce development piece of it.
Any other questions?
And here I thought I was going to get no questions. Great questions.
Well, thank you all so much for being with us. Thank you, Rob.
Sure,
it's
thank
wonderful
you.
to learn more about North End, and we'll stay in touch and
Yes.
hopefully all keep ourselves informed on the progress.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
So, thank you.